Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you here and people on Zoom. Uh, I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward, as you are, to seeing and hearing Pat Toskes' Adventures in Living. Although we're both street people, I only know Pat as a stylish lady of many hats, seen walking her Lulu, her Yorkie, also as petite as Pat. Like many hats, Pat has worn many titles. She says, by way of introduction, my title, who knew, not even me? How did I know when I had grandchildren that I was going to be called Lovey and my husband was going to be called Big Guy? How did I know I would have such fun times with my family, meet people from all over the world, and be married to the same man for 60 years? Who knew? Not even me.
It's not loud enough for the Zoomers. Sorry to bother you.
I'm Pat Toskes, and I'm so glad to see all of you here today. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm Pat Toskes, and I'm so glad that you're all here today and the people on Zoom. I appreciate it very much. And I owe so much to all the people that helped me because I couldn't do it by myself. Pam Kruger helped me, Mary Sue Koppel, Frank Townsend, and the magician Dick Martin. I only did a little bit, and they did a lot. So I hope you'll share with me.
We're doing Adventures in Living today with Pat Toskes. She told me that some time ago her kids gave her a 50th wedding anniversary present of your life through the eyes of your kids. And this is going to be her opportunity to tell her life through her own point of view. So let's get started.
Okay.
Tell me how you were born.
How was I born? I was born in a blizzard. By the time the blizzard was over, there were 22 inches of snow in the streets. I don't know how my father got to the hospital to pick up my mother and myself, but he did. And he took me back to their home, which at that time was in Woodsdale, which was a neighborhood in Baltimore, Maryland. And it looked like a very nice house there, and we had ducks and we had chickens because it's after the Depression. And even though it was after the Depression, my mama said that they still had ration stamps. And so that the neighbors would collect ration stamps for shoes and coffee and all those kind of things. But the Depression being over, my mom and dad had lost their things, like their boat, their membership to the yacht club, and they had to sell their house. And then we moved to apartments. But my mom and dad always made it happy. And so we moved to an apartment.
I like the story about the flour sacks.
The flour sacks. When I was 12 years old, I went to work in the Blair Market because my grandparents had a stall there. They sold all kinds of meats and cold cuts and cheese. And I worked at Buckheister's Homemade Chocolates, which was a stall right across from them. So at lunchtime, my grandmother would bring me a sandwich, which was the most delicious sandwich I've ever had. It was just a fresh baked potato roll from one of the ladies, and then a slice of ham from my grandparents. And And it was wonderful. It didn't have any condiments. But the lady who made the potato rolls, she had flour. And she had flour sacks. And she gave them to my grandmother. And that's how I got my dresses. My grandmother, the designer that she was, used one pattern in different flour sacks. So they were all the same, made out of different flour sacks. And my father always tied the sashes because he was a great bow tire.
Tell us about your family and your grandmother, and you had two grandmothers?
I
two
was so
grandfathers?
fortunate. I was so blessed because I had the grandparents alive on my father's side and my mother's side. And on my father's side, they were Big Mum and Big Papa. On my mother's side, they were Little Mum and Little Papa.
Mhm.
And on Sundays, that was a great day for the family to get together because we had buns, fresh baked buns that my Big Mum and Big Papa brought. And my mom made the eggs, and we all sat around the table after church and talked. And at that time, I was younger, not 16 yet. And so I would go with my little Bill Mom and Little Papa, and we would go out to Loch Raven Reservoir. They had a dam there, and you could watch the fish jump all around the dam and go over the dam, and they'd bring lots of bread. And then we would go to Knox's Ice Cream. And Nice's ice cream was across the road from Murray's Ice Cream. But my grandparents, for some reason, always preferred Knox's, so we went there. And ice cream cones were 5 cents. And if you got a sherbet ice cream cone, that was 4 cents. We were big spenders, huh?
Pat, when you were young, you joined an organization.
I joined the Brownies, which would go on to be a senior Girl Scout. And I didn't want to be a Brownie. My mother said, I think you should be a Brownie. Well, my mother taught me very important traits, and that was to always tell the truth. That was the most important one that she told me. So the day came when you had taken your pre-things, and then it was going to be the ceremony where you joined the Brownies. So they do twist me and turn me and all these little things. And then they come and they say, Pat, now why would you like to be a Brownie? Well, I listened to the other girls and they said, oh, it was my dream to be a Brownie. I always wanted to be a Brownie. And then another girl said, well, it's an honor. I am so honored that I get to be a Brownie, that I can be a Girl Scout. So then it came my turn. And she said, Pat, why do you want to be a Brownie? And I said, because my mother made me. Because I remember that my mother told me always to tell the truth. So I told the truth. And I enjoyed the Brownies. And I enjoyed the Girl Scouts. And I went and I had a badge, sash filled with all the badges that you could possibly have. And I learned that being a Brownie and being a Girl Scout was wonderful. So the moral of the story is, maybe your mother knows the best, so always listen to your mom.
You were working at 12, and then at some point you met a husband.
Mm-hmm. I had gone to Phil's senior prom, and at his senior prom, that was where I met him. So he was going to Hopkins University.
So tell us about how you met him. I mean, is it seeing him across the room? Or...
I saw him at his senior prom.
But...
And he came over and he talked to me.
Uh-huh.
And then he called me. And he invited me to go to a lacrosse game at Hopkins. And after that, we were a couple. And he was in Phi Eph fraternity. And we would go all to the parties there, which was lots of fun. In fact, he even invited my parents to go to them too. And then when he finished college, that was when we got married.
So tell us about your wedding.
Well, my wedding is very different than the way the weddings are today. They're very glamorous, you know. The girls go and get their nails done and their hair done and their makeup done. And they wear beautiful dresses. They have all kinds of parties. Well, I thought I had a wonderful wedding, and it was a wonderful wedding, but not like today's wedding. First of all, I had my sorority and my sister. Phil had his fraternity and his brother. And then we went, it was in Northwood Appleholm Methodist Church in Maryland. And then we went down in Fellowship Hall, and we had punch and cookies.
And you had how many groomsmen?
We had 11 groomsmen and his brother. And I had 11 bridesmaids and my sister.
Did they all wear long dresses?
No, they wore them, they were just a little bit below their knees, but they were alike. And they were in lavender, different shades of lavender and purple, which were my favorite colors.
And you were, of course, in white.
I was in white, yes.
And the guys wore?
Black tuxedos.
Oh, so they were very dressed.
But they were all Jewish because my husband was in a Jewish fraternity. But they all came to the Christian church. And so that was, we were the only, Phil was the only Christian in the fraternity. So I was the Christian girl. And actually I became queen of the fraternity and ran in the convertible and waved to everybody. So we were a pretty special couple. We stood out because we were Christians. So I think that's why I got to be the queen, because I was Christian and we stood out, we were different.
And then your honeymoon.
Oh, my honeymoon. Well, we went to Cove Haven. And I don't remember the exact prices, but you will see them in the picture. And it was something like $142, and that included the week with all their special activities, their champagne breakfast, their hayride, their barbecue, whatever they had. And we had this little room, wonderful people were there, and it cost $142 for the week. So out of curiosity, I called Cove Haven and found out what it was today, and it was between $2,000 and $3,000 plus.
For the same experience. So you raised a family.
I had 3 children. I had 2 of them in Baltimore. One in our first apartment, one in our second townhouse. And then we moved to New Jersey, and my husband went to the University of Pennsylvania. We lived in New Jersey because it's less expensive. And one of my friends told me about a house that somebody was selling. So that worked out perfectly. But it was a wonderful place to live. And we had a really good time, but I didn't realize I was in a flood area. And the first day we got there, I had come up with my mother-in-law, who was great, and my 2 children. And I decided that I was going to paint because I didn't want green. I wanted a white house. So I painted. And I went to bed wee hours of the morning, and my head just hit the pillow, and I heard a knock at the door. And it was the movers. It wasn't even 6 a.m.
So you painted the whole outside of your house?
No, I painted the inside.
Oh.
The inside.
I'm feeling better now.
Yeah, the inside. And, I had wonderful neighbors. I remember when my husband thought it'd be wonderful if the children had some rats, because he had rats in his lab. So he brought the rats home. But one day, one of the rats got loose, and I went to my neighbors. I said, when your son gets old, could he find that rat that's loose in my house somewhere?
Tell us about your kids.
Oh, well, Tammy and Tracy were born in Baltimore, and Stephen is my caboose. And when I was in Rockville, Maryland, that was when Phil was in the Berry Plan, which he served in the Army there. I had always wanted a 3rd child, but God didn't bless me with a 3rd child. So I went to Miami, actually, and I came home. Well, I know what happened. We went out for dinner, and the lady said, "Oh, you have such a glow." And I said, my husband, Phil, I said, "I'm pregnant." He said, "How do you know?" I said, "She told me I have a glow. It must be the pregnancy glow." So I went home, and I was pregnant. And My friends didn't know to say congratulations or condolences because it's been 10 years since my last child. But when I went to the doctor at Walter Reed, he said to me, the medication that you've been taking causes birth defects. So there's a very high risk that you're taking that you're going to have a deformed child. So I really recommend that you have an abortion.
Mm.
And I looked at him and I said, you know what? God has blessed me with this child, and I'm not going to have an abortion. So when I came to Gainesville and Stephen was born, because at that time you didn't know if you were going to have a girl or a boy. So the baby was born, and I looked and I said, he has a penis. I said, hands and toes? He said, it's perfect. So God answered my prayers.
Let's talk about your husband. And he had a very distinguished career.
He did.
He did. And how did he get started?
Well, he started out at the University of Maryland, and then he went to the University of Pennsylvania. He was successful wherever he went and received cum laude, scholarships. He did lots of things, but he went into the Berry Plan because he was deferred.
Now, can you explain the Berry Plan?
Yes, he was deferred until he finished his training. That's what the Berry Plan allowed you to do. And that meant that you, after you finished your training, that you would go into the armed forces somewhere. He went into the Army, and he was in the Berry Plan at Walter Reed, which he did 3 years of research since they deferred him from going into the active service. And at that time, he went in as a major. We got to go to the officers club, and I got to go to the commissary, and we lived in Rockville, and it was very special. And then from the Berry Plan, we came to Gainesville. And I'm like, where is Gainesville? But I quickly found out. I had heard of it one time before when I was at the university, when Phil was at the University of Maryland. And I was on a committee where we would have different wives come, and we would help them. Where is the laundromat? Where is this? And what childcare and everything. So one day I got a knock at my door, and I thought, well, who's this man? Actually, it was a house husband, and he was the one that I had to help with his daughter to find the laundromat and all those different things. Well, his wife's name was Ronnie. Ultimately, Ronnie came to Gainesville and trained with my husband.
In Shands?
Pardon?
At Shands?
At Shands,
Interesting.
So, and then when we went to visit friends in Spain, we said we were going to move to Gainesville. I'm like, I don't even know where Gainesville is. And at that time, they had encyclopedias. And they got out their encyclopedia and they said, here's Gainesville, it's right here. But Gainesville, when I came to Gainesville, it was like a different world to me. Because when Phil was in the Berry Plan and we were at Walter Reed, I could go to Georgetown, I could go to Tyson's Corner, I could go anywhere around, so many shopping centers. And when I went here, I'm like, first of all, it was the first house in the subdivision. I didn't know anything about taking care of a pool or anything like that, and I was pregnant with my third child. And I thought, well, maybe I need to go downtown and see their downtown, see what I'm missing. So I went downtown, and at that time they had Wilson's department store. And I went into Wilson's, and the ladies had on hairnets, and they had their hands on the counter with gloves on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what God-forsaken place did I move to? But my husband said we would only be here for 2 years. That was in 1973. And guess what? I'm still here.
Let's go back and talk a bit more about your distinguished husband's career and how you fit into it in some ways.
Oh my gosh. He was always writing chapters in books or he was writing board questions for young doctors who wanted to be GI doctors, gastrointestinal doctors. And he was always getting these requests. And then he was president of this organization and president of that organization. And one of the organizations was the AGA, the American Gastroenterological Association. And with that, my husband's specialty, he loved the pancreas. Ever since he had worked in Dr. Raskin's lab in Maryland, he loved the pancreas. So I always said, the pancreas took us around the world because we went to go to so many countries and we met people from each country. And of course, we had a personal tour. It wasn't like we went there as tourists. We had people that took us around like we were their closest friends. It was wonderful. And one of the meetings that was very memorable to me was when we went to India and
May I just stop you a minute? You're at all these places because your husband is the president of the International Association.
yes,
And so they have their meetings around the world.
we were representing the United States.
Okay, gotcha.
Mhm. And so we went, and representing the United States, I set off a hot air balloon for world peace. And that was very exciting to be up on the stage and do that. It meant a lot to me, and I will never forget that.
You went to Thailand.
I went to Thailand, and when I was there, the lady said, "Oh, I'm going to take you to a special place." And they made a dress for me. They took all my measurements, picked out the material, they made a dress, and I love that dress. I really love that dress. I still have it to this day, and it was beautiful. And then when I was in Singapore, we went to it was like a shopping mall. But on the bottom floor, we had a person that went with us, and on the bottom floor, they had different, they were just like something like kiosks. And they measured you, and you picked out the material, and they made it for you, and they delivered it to your hotel the next day. When I was in Japan, I went to this wonderful dinner, and I said to the girl, I said, "Oh my gosh, I love your dress." She was dressed like a geisha girl. The next day, I had a geisha girl dress at my hotel. So I hope that when people come to the United States, that people in the U.S. are as kind as the people that I've met all over the world.
That's a beautiful statement. I just want to read a little bit of the list of the places that you say you got to go to because of your husband's work. Spain, India, Thailand, the Virgin Islands, Mexico, the Amazon, Peru, Switzerland, Singapore, Japan, Taiwan. And I'm sure there are one or two more, but that...
There certainly are. And the Amazon, I went on in January, and that was not with my husband.
Oh, okay.
Because he's deceased. But the reason why I went on that was because I heard Jim Wilshire give his adventures in living. And he said his favorite trip was going to the Amazon. And he showed a picture of this boat. And I'm like, I have that brochure right on my desk. So I went home, and sure enough, there was the same boat that he had taken. And I thought, I always wanted to go to the Amazon. And he said it was wonderful. So off I went to the Amazon.
Was that an OCAMAC travel?
No,
You
it
were-
was sponsored by the alumni of the University of Florida.
Wonderful, wonderful. You just mentioned Jim Wilshire and his adventures in living. You also mentioned something about coming to Gainesville and meeting with Brenda Thomas, whose adventures in good living we just did.
That's right. And I went to Brenda after her talk, and I said, Brenda, you meant so much to me, particularly because when we moved to Gainesville and didn't know anybody, you and your husband had us over to dinner. And that meant so much. And then when we had so much traveling to do, you were at Emmer Travel, and you helped us with our trips. So I respect you so much and I love you for everything that you did for us. And I was so happy to hear about your life and adventures in living.
And you have 3 children, and you've mentioned them before. What are they doing now?
Well, Tammy and Tracy live in Gainesville, and Tammy is an orthoptist, which means that she takes care of the muscles in the eyes and works very closely with the ophthalmologist.
I never heard of that.
Yes, it's a very unusual field, but it's a very needed field and very specialized. And she graduated from UF and then took a 2-year fellowship to learn how this works. The intercoordination of the eyes and the muscles and the brain. So it's a neuropathological thing. My other daughter is a family therapist, and she sees adults as well as children. Now she has twins, Peyton and Carson. Peyton is married, and Carson is still in school. He's at the University of Jacksonville, I think they call it North Central?
North Florida.
North Florida, okay. And Peyton is a nurse, and she doesn't live in Gainesville anymore. She lives in Tampa. And back to Tammy, she has 2 children. Kendall lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and she's a data analyst. But now she works with supply chains, and she trains people all around the United States. And her company has their home office in Belgium. And then there's my caboose, Stephen, and he lives in South Florida, and he has a law firm, and he works in securities. And that means what he works in securities is if you or me have a problem where someone has, for fraud or negligence or whatever, company has taken our money, he gives it back for them. So people are very grateful to him. And recently, his wife Paula told me that one of the people were so grateful they wrote a letter and said he should be called Sir Stephen Toskes. He should be royalty for what he did to help them out.
Wonderful. That's charming.
Mm-hmm.
Pat, I think one of the things that intrigues people here at Okemuk is the rumor that you used to be a model.
Oh, I did that. But that was sort of later in the line. First of all, when Phil was in school, I went to dental school. And the first doctor that I worked for was an orthodontist. And I worked for him for 5 years. And then I went to work for a general dentist. And then I became a mom. And then I took a course in interior decorating, and I worked for a decorating company. You see, I did a lot of things. So then came the day where one of my daughters wanted to join the teen board at Moss Brothers, which was the department store in Gainesville in 1973, because there were no other department stores except Sears, if you want to call that a department store. And so my daughter said, well, Mom, you need to take these papers in. It's the last day and I want to get on the teen board. That time I was painting the outside of the house. And so I got in the station wagon, I drove over, I went to the office, and the girl, the fashion coordinator, was on the phone. Just like motioned me to sit down. So I sat down and she finished her call and she said, are you here to apply for the teen board? I said, no. I have the papers for my daughter, her application to be on the teen board. So she said to me, well, have you ever modeled before? And I said, yes, because when I was in Baltimore, when I was a mom, my grandmother took me to a TV show. And so man asked me if I would model for their company. I said, well, I don't know, I have to ask my parents. So my parents, especially my dad, checked it out.
Where did you meet this man?
We were at a TV show. My grandmother took me to a TV show.
So you were in the audience,
We
and
were
a
in the
guy
audience.
came up to you and said,
Have you ever modeled? Would you model for our company?
huh,
So my parents checked it out and they said, well, it doesn't cost you anything, go ahead. So I was in boat shows and did brochures and different things like that. So that was fun. So I told her, yes, I had modeled before.
But before we get there, tell us about being a model for a boat.
Well, because I was not one of the taller women, they used the smaller women for the boat shows because that made the boats look bigger. So then when I went to work for Moss Brothers, I could do the petite modeling. And I had fun doing that. And then one day, the fashion coordinator said to me, well, Pat, she said, I'm going to retire. She said, would you like to be fashion coordinator? And I said, I don't think so. And she said, oh no, I think you would be good at it. She said, just go and see. So the day came for the interview. My daughter gave me a rose. She said, I know you can do it, Mom. I know you can do it. You don't have any clothes, but you can do it. Because at that point, I didn't buy clothes for myself. And so I went to the interview, and here's all these girls, like 5'9", 5'8". At that time, they wore spiked shoes, had on false eyelashes. And here was little me. That time, I didn't have my nails done or anything like that. And they were all dressed to the tins. So I went in for my interview, and that night, the manager called me, and he said, well, Pat, welcome aboard. You are our new fashion coordinator. I said, wait, I don't even know. I haven't even talked to my husband about that. Well, it turned out that he said, as long as you get your work done, you can make your own hours. So it worked out to be a fun job for me, and people said, well, what does a fashion coordinator do? Well, that's a very interesting question. And the way I answer that is I say, whatever anybody else doesn't want to do. I did Breakfast with Santa, Breakfast with the Easter Bunny. The teen board had their fashion shows, so each month we did a show. And then I dressed the mannequins around the store, and I did the window. And I had names for my mannequins. These were my fluffy ladies. These were my little gals. But the one thing that I didn't like about dressing the mannequins was I could do their jewelry. I could do their hair. I could pick their clothes. But getting their shoes, I had to know what size the model wore and what mannequin wore and what size, what colors, and the number to go back into the room to find the shoes. Well, the shoes and the boxes to me was like a jungle. It was a true jungle. And I did not like doing that. So I was very fortunate that I found a friend who worked in the shoe department, and I would tell her these were the styles I wanted, and this was the shoe I wanted. And she would get the boxes for me. Because when I did the fashion shows, for each model that I had, and I usually had like 5 or 6 models, I would pick out 4 dresses. And then they could pick out the 2 that they liked the most to model. And then I would have to find out what shoe size they wore. And that's where the jungle came in. And I did not like that. So fortunately, I found somebody and they helped me with that. But picking the jewelry was always fun, and the dresses were fun. And I was always so happy to call the models. And they were just so thrilled to be in the shows, and that was really fun. And I always tell my girls to be persistent. Be persistent. If it's something you want, just go for it. Because the girls would come in and they would leave their resumes with me. But the girls who I would call back would be the girls who were persistent. The girls who came in and they said, Mrs. Toskes, have you decided whether I can model for you yet? The other thing I did with that was personal shopper. So if you were going on a honeymoon or a special trip or whatever it might be, you could call me and say, Pat, I'm going on whatever, and could you pick me out some clothes? So I would have a roller rack, and I would go around the store, pick out their size of clothes that I thought that might work for whatever occasion it was, and I would leave them on a roller rack in my office, and they could come in and pick out whatever they wanted. I didn't work on a commission, so it didn't matter what they picked to me. And when I also did bridal shows, And then one day I was going to do a Liz Claiborne show. And the representative from Liz Claiborne came in and she said, well, I want all your models to wear turbans. And I said, nobody in Gainesville wears a turban. I said, no, we can do with turbans, but I don't think that's a very good idea if you want to sell any clothes, because people aren't going to buy them if they see them with a turban. But that show did very well, and we did not wear turbans. My favorite shows were the restaurant shows, where I could go around with a microphone and I could say whatever was happening with the model and describe it as they walked down the runway and tell them what the model was wearing, what kind of show it was, and why we were doing whatever we were doing. Like, for instance, a day to morning show, what can you wear to work, and then go out in the evening. So whatever it was. But I learned from that experience that I was not going to be a waitress, because I did not do a good job. I would be walking around with a microphone and somebody would say to me, oh, could you get me a cup of coffee? And I'd say, okay, sure, I'll get you a cup of coffee. And so when I would finish that segment and go back up, I would say to one of the waitresses, she needs a cup of coffee. And they would say, who? And I would look around and say, I don't know, I don't remember.
You brought Lulu today, and we
I
are
did.
delighted to meet her. But you have a story about your dogs.
I do. So I said 3 dogs. That's right, 3 dogs. Well, the first dog was given to me by a friend, and it was a little Chihuahua. And then the second dog, my son had the chicken pox. And our neighborhood had lights, and he was very uncomfortable at night. So I would walk him. And this big dog, like a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, followed us home. I looked and looked, and nobody claimed the dog. So now I had 2 dogs. Then my daughter called me from school, and she said, Mother, the dog's been hit by a car. Can you come and help? So I went down and took the dog to the vet. We got the dog fixed, and it had been abused, and it looked so shaggy and wonderful. Not wonderful at all. And then we took care of it, and it turned out to be a sweet, sweet dog. It was a Lapso. And then after we lost those dogs, my series with my Yorkies started. And Lulu is my 5th Yorkie,
Wow.
and she is my baby. And she's 13 years old now. And she's my baby. She sleeps with me. She goes everywhere with me. The doctor, the dentist, the hairdresser, you name it.
She is attached to you.
Yes,
There's a story attached to your bracelet there, too.
that's right. That's right. I would always say to my mom, I love your bracelet. I love your bracelet. And I loved that it was the first thing that Dad gave you. Dad gave it to my mom before they were married. And I just loved that bracelet. And one day she said to me, you love this bracelet, don't you? I said, I really do. So the next time she came to visit me in Gainesville, she said, Pat, I want you to have this bracelet. I know it means so much to you. And I want to see you enjoy it. So when I wear this bracelet, I feel very close to my mom and my dad, because it was given to my mother with so much love. And I wear it with so much love because it was theirs.
Pat, you have a wonderful story about going sailing.
I do. We had a couple that we were very friendly with, and they had a sailboat. And we would like to go sailing with them on their sailboat. So this one particular time, we went to meet them. We went on their sailboat, and we were just having a marvelous day, and we found something, or saw something floating in the water. So we picked it up. It was like a round box, and we just threw it aside and kept on because we were having such a good time. And so then we went into this cove, and there was this boat there. It looked uninhabited. It was sort of rusty. It had laundry hanging on it, and it had a sign, "We love Jesus," and it looked like it could sink at any moment. So I said, Captain John, could you get close to that boat and I'm going to jump on it and I'm going to say to my parents, hey, we went sailing with Gail and John. So he takes me over and I step over and I hold on to this, with some kind of like metal something. And I held on to that and I put a foot on the other boat. And here came this man up from below. No shirt on, just shorts, long black curly hair. And I'm like, Captain John, I'm coming back on that boat. I got off very, very quickly. But I did get a picture of that boat, which I'm going to share with all of you. And I think it'll make you laugh because I sent that picture to my parents, just like I said I would. And I said, we went sailing with Gail and John. That was such a memorable time. And then we hadn't opened the box yet, and we were sitting talking, and Captain John went down and he checked on the radio, and it said that a box of marijuana had been dropped off and the Coast Guard was looking for it. We quickly placed it back in the water and off we went to a different location.
Did you change your mind about Gainesville?
Well, my son, when his dad passed away, he said, Mom, come down to South Florida. Be here. Well, I do think South Florida is beautiful. And I do think that their retirement places down there are gorgeous. However, there's so many wonderful people at Oak Hammock that I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stay here.
Good for you. We're glad.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Pat?
First, I want to say a couple words. People ask me why I wear a hat. I want to say a couple words first. People ask me why I wear a hat. You can see how my face was red in the video. And that was because I didn't wear a hat that day. So I always have to wear a hat because even though I wear sunscreen, my face gets red. And it protects my face. So, and I wish I could have given this in person, but as you hear in the video. So please forgive me, but I enjoy doing it and I couldn't do it without all the wonderful people who helped me. Anybody have?
Pat, tell them about the markets in Baltimore and how wonderful they are and about
Oh
crabs.
my gosh. Of course, it was back in the olden days compared to people today, but they were like stalls and they were open. There was no air conditioning. So if it was snow, it was freezing. If it was summertime, it was hot. And it was right near the tenements. And so the little children would come around in wintertime with bare feet. But plenty of things to buy in there. They had this, I think it's called Utz's potato chips. They were there. And the very famous cookies that Baltimore is famous for. I don't remember the name of those, but they have icing on them. People go up there and buy them and bring them back. Everything was there, anything imaginable, seafood, meats, cold cuts, and Buckheister's chocolate where I worked. So it was a wonderful place for anything that you wanted. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming and all the people on Zoom. Take care.
Good job.